this phone should scare the pants off of companies like Samsung. Let me tell you why. So this is a TCL 10L. It just came to me in the mail yesterday, and I was just kind of like, oh, I've been looking forward to these phones. I saw them at CES. I talked to TCL about them. They're making a bunch of phones that are coming in below $500. This has got a glass back. It's all that kind of stuff. I handled the phones at the event. I talked to the folks at the event. One thing I didn't do, though, and I haven't done until I got this thing in my hand. One thing I didn't do until I got this thing in my hand was really look at the specs of any of it and talk. I just didn't want to know anything about the phone until I had it in my hand, until I really used it a little bit. I just didn't want to be like spec hunting, if you will. And so I just looked at this TCL thing and I was like, when I get the phone, I'll check it out. And it's got 4 camera lenses. It's got 2 flashes, which you just saw because I turned on the flashlight. It's got a fingerprint reader here. It also has face unlock, and it's got, multifunction button here. It's got volume rocker. It's got a headphone jack. Okay? It's got a headphone jack. So, of course I'm excited about this TCL phone. And of course, I'm excited about the fact that companies like Samsung, who this year, no matter how much of a fan of Samsung you are or you are not, you have to admit that this year Samsung kind of didn't read the room when it came to getting the phones at the prices that people were willing to pay. And this is even before coronavirus and everything else. Samsung released their most expensive phones in the S line ever, and nobody was buying them. Nobody was buying them because they were too expensive. And all the time, throughout 2019, and then, here in the beginning of 2020, I've been thinking, and a lot of other people have been thinking this way, that the mid-range, the $500-ish phones are going to be a lot more interesting in 2020 than they would have been in years past. I mean, you've got the brand new iPhone SE that just came out. There's a lot of used phones that you can get. I got this Note 9 for $350, Amazon renewed. Then, of course, you've got the iPhone 11. The iPhone 11 is not that expensive compared to some of the other things. So Samsung, releases really expensive phones. Whether or not they're nice phones, we could have that conversation. But I knew that TCL was coming. And I'm surprised that Samsung didn't. If you're not familiar with TCL as a company, this is not the first time that TCL has made a smartphone. TCL has made smartphones under the Alcatel name. They made the most recent BlackBerry phones. And I guess this year they just decided to come out with their own models. They're going to have this is the 10L, and then there's the 10 Pro, and then there's the 10 5G. And all of those phones are going to be under $500. Samsung, you should be very afraid. Be very afraid. Like I said, I didn't look at the specs. I didn't really study up on these phones until I got this in and I put it in my hands and I set it up and I used it. It's a beautiful phone. Beautiful phone. Look at that crazy... Look at that wallpaper. Beautiful phone. And so after I used it for a little while, I was like, wow, this is snappy. This is nice. It's doing its thing. I decided to go on TCL's website and look up the specs. This has got the Snapdragon 865 processor in it, which is, not the top of the line, but it's not absolutely terrible. This has got did I mention it has a headphone jack? Yeah, it has a headphone jack. I really haven't been all that, there's no lag or anything as I've been moving through different apps and all that kind of stuff. Nothing has really stood out to me as like, oh, well, this phone is $250. $250 for this phone. If this phone is $250 and the other two phones that TCL are going to release are going to be less than $500, which means you're getting a 5G phone for less than $500. If that's the case, why would anybody buy a Samsung phone for $1,400 or for $1,000 or for $1,200 or for whatever? Samsung has done really well with their A-series phones. The A-series phones don't get a lot of play. They don't get a lot of talk. Most people don't really say very much about them. But the thing about the A-series phones is Samsung sells the majority of their stuff right in that market, right in that like $500 or less market. They do a lot of business there. They have a lot of phones in that market. The S series is kind of their boutique model. The Note series was supposed to be the kitchen sink model. And they were the ones that got all the press. But Samsung has sold phones in the lower tier markets for a long time, and they've done well. But now, here's a company like TCL. TCL is not a small company. It might be a lesser known company in the United States, but it is not a small company. They make they make just about everything that Samsung makes. You know, refrigerators and washers and dryers and blah, 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 all kinds of stuff. Now they're stepping in to Samsung's backyard and leaving them a little present. If you can make a 4-lens camera, 48 megapixel, phone out of glass with a flat screen for $250, why would you ever buy a Samsung phone again? Why? What would be the reason? If you go strictly by price, why would you buy a more expensive phone when you could get this one for $250? Now, this hasn't been released yet. I have a full review coming after the release, but it just got me thinking about what is happening in the smartphone industry right now. The smartphone bubble has been about ready to burst for a while. You know, so over the past 10 years, smartphones at first were improving exponentially, one year after the other, big improvements, especially on the Android side, but on the iPhone side as well. Big improvements from year to year to year to year. But since 2017, smartphones really haven't improved all that much. That's why I can grab this Note 9 from a couple of years ago, and it feels like a brand new phone still. This is a better phone than the Note 10, Note 10 Plus. It just is. It's a great phone. If you didn't tell me that it wasn't a brand new, straight off the line phone, I wouldn't know it. Smartphones have not changed significantly enough. And I know some of you out there are saying, oh, but the cameras. Cameras don't matter. You know what matters? The people who use the cameras to take the pictures. If you can't, or you don't know how, or you haven't built the skill enough to be very good with a mediocre camera, then a better camera is never going to do you any good. So that's not to say the Note 9 camera is fine, but the smartphone market not really growing exponentially anymore. A phone from 2020 versus a phone from 2017 is not that big a leap. Once we come out of this situation that we're in with the coronavirus and all the stuff, economies are going to recover, but they're going to recover slowly. People are going to start buying things at a much slower rate. And in different parts of the world, I'm sure that will be a lot different. But I believe that the era of the $1,000 smartphone as sort of the norm is over. This TCL phone right here is sort of the herald of that. A high quality phone for 1/4 of the price of its flagship competition. It's not as good a phone as those flagship phones, but for the majority of people, this phone would likely do them just fine. So I don't know. I just wanted to come on and make this video quickly and talk to you guys a little bit about where the smartphone market is. The fact that the smartphone bubble has burst and the coronavirus situation has made that happen much more quickly than it might have. But 2020 was always going to be about budget phones and how close can they get to the performance of the phones that are at the top of the heap. And the answer to that question, in looking at all these phones that I've been talking about here, the answer to that question is pretty darn close. So if you're a Samsung Knight, or if you're an Apple sheep, or if you know, any of those things, these phones might not be for you. But if you're a regular everyday person who just wants to go in and buy a phone and not put yourself in a ton of debt to do so, the world of smartphones is getting a lot more interesting for you starting right now. Tell me what you think. I really think that there will always be sort of the flagship level phones, but they will become more of a boutique thing. They will become more of a thing that people buy, you know, as an upsell, as a you know, I really want this thing. Apple's got the SE. We watch TCL come out with these phones. The used market is better than it's ever been before, and now Amazon's Renewed program is putting the opportunity to put renewed phones into people's hands a lot more easily than it was to buy used phones in the past. So tell me what you think down in the comments. Thanks for listening to me ramble on for a few seconds. I hope you're having a great weekend, and until the next time, I'm out!